Hello there, welcome or welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Samantha, and this is my channel where I talk all about books. Anyway, today I'm coming to you with a video which is long overdue, like my last video where I started off saying it's long overdue. If you didn't see my last video, it was the end of the year book tag, I'll link it in the card. But I've had two exciting updates, one very much not exciting, but life-altering for the time being, life events that have happened recently. So that's why I haven't been posting videos, and that's why this video, which is really overdue, is happening now, which should have happened months ago, but oh well. First of all, let me tell you what I'm doing today. Today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books I've read since August, because I basically never got around to filming my August wrap-up because September was a really busy month. So then I was like, okay, I'll just film my August and September wrap-up all in one go in the beginning of October, and then one of these life events happened. Actually, two of the life events happened right around the same time, and then basically in November, it just like, it wasn't gonna happen. And anyway, so here we are, we're filming again, we're back, and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books I've read since August. So basically I'm going to be ranking all of the books that I've read in August, September, October, and November from worst to best, because I thought a rank would be better than just going through month by month. Makes more sense to me. So anyway, yeah, that's what we're gonna do today, but first of all, let me tell you what's been going on. So, the exciting stuff, at the end of October, I got engaged, which is very exciting, to my lovely fiance Alex, who is over there playing video games. You can't see him, but you may hear him swearing when he inevitably loses. But yeah, so we got engaged in October, which was amazing. In the beginning of October, I interviewed for a new job as a library assistant, and I got the job. And then the next day, after I received the phone call that I got the job, Alex was in a car accident. So yeah, that was the bad news. He ended up in the hospital for a couple of weeks, and then he's since been released, and now he's living with me at my house for the time being while he recovers. He's not too badly injured, but it is going to be like life-altering for the time being. He had some damage to his hip and his knee on one of his legs, but luckily that was the only damage, so yeah, he's okay. But it's just a long road to recovery, and it's been very stressful and emotional, but he's getting better, so it's all good. Anyway, life updates aside, let's get into the ranking, shall we? So in the 4 months that I'm going to be covering, I read 19 books, except I did have 2 DNFs. So technically I only finished 17, but I'm going to be talking about 19. And then I had 1 2-star rating, 2 2.5 star ratings, 3 3-star ratings, 1 3.5, 5 4-star ratings, 4 4.5s, and 1 5. So actually my reading the last few months has not been too bad. Obviously, we did have some DNFs and some low ratings, but I did have quite a few 4s, 4.5s, and 5s. So that's pretty good and surprising. I feel like my reading has been terrible, but I think that's just because there's been so much else going on. I'm going to start off with the DNFs. So the first book I'm going to talk about, and the worst one I started reading recently, back in August, was Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I started reading this book when I was at work one day because we were really, really quiet. This was back when I was a waitress, not in my new job. Don't worry, I'm not reading on the job at my new job. This was at my old job, where I shouldn't have been reading on the job, but I was. And you know what, it's fine. We had no customers, there was nothing for me to do, so I was gonna read something on my phone instead of playing games on my phone. So I decided to start this one because I'd heard like raving reviews of it, and it's just sort of like a memoir about this woman, Dolly Alderton. I think she's a journalist, and so she decided to write this sort of memoir about just like everything that she's learned about love, but also just like life stories from like a really young age of like, you know, being like a teenager and just like starting to date to like her late 20s. I didn't get that far though. But yeah, it was just like really, it wasn't great. It felt really, my friend Evie described it as this, I believe, and I thought that it was really accurate, but it's just like really self-indulgent. It's just like, your life is not actually that remarkable that you need to be writing this book about it, and like it's nothing new, and honestly some of the stuff seemed a bit like ridiculous and like it was made up just to be like shocking. So yeah, I ended up reading like a quarter of it, I think, or maybe a bit more, and then I just decided that actually I was not interested in continuing on, so I didn't finish that one. Anyway, I will say it was quite readable. She had like a good writing style, and once I started reading it, like it was quite easy to read it quite quickly because I did read all of that just while I was at work on that one shift, and then I wasn't reading the whole shift, don't worry. We did have customers eventually, but apart from that, like once I stopped reading it, I had no desire to pick it back up again, so I didn't. So the next book that I DNF'd left. I started it in September for the Book-Oplathon, and I decided to stop reading it in November when I was trying to listen to the audiobook, and literally I was so bored and I didn't care, and I got the message. I understood what Orwell was trying to say, but that was 1984 by George Orwell, and I'm really sad to say that because I read Animal Farm by him a few years ago now. I think it was probably like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. It was quite a while actually. But I read Animal Farm and I loved it. It was so easy to read. I really liked his writing style. It was clear to understand like the metaphors, what was going on, what he was trying to get across. And then 1984 was like, you know, I understood what he was getting across, but it was so boring. So maybe the fact that Animal Farm is only like 100 pages was what made me enjoy it so much, because like it's like, you know, it's like a nice story and you understand what Orwell's trying to say without having to struggle through 200 more pages of that. But yeah, I thought the characters were extremely unlikable. I didn't really like the setting, and yeah, just overall didn't enjoy it. So I stopped reading it about halfway through. Like, I made it a good chunk of the way through because I found the audiobook on Scribd. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got as far as I did because I was not enjoying myself. Moving on to the next book on my list, that is Small Town Big Magic by Hazel Beck. I read this book back in October because it's like a witchy book, but set in this like small town where the main character is, she's basically the owner of this bookshop, and she's also like a councilwoman in the town council. And I really liked that aspect because when the book started off, it was giving me like big Leslie Knope vibes from Parks and Recreation, which I love. So I was really enjoying it. I started out loving it, but as the book went on, I started to hate it. I also listened to the audiobook of this. But yeah, so it basically follows our main character. I think her name's Emerson or something like that. And she owns this bookstore. She's a councilwoman. She's just going about her day-to-day life, doesn't know anything about magic or anything like that. And then one day something happens, like they're preparing for this festival that happens in their town every year, and she's basically like attacked by these like magical beings. And so she finds out that actually she's a witch and she'd just forgotten all about it for whatever reason. Her town is basically full of witches as well as like normal people who don't have powers. And yeah, she's just like coming to terms with that. There's a little bit of romance, but it's fade to black. And it was honestly like not good in my opinion. Like I said, I started out having a really good time because the like small town vibes was giving me like Gilmore Girls vibes, and then the like councilwoman aspect was giving me the Leslie Knope vibes that I was loving. But then as the book went on, I just realized I hated the characters. They were so annoying and they made really stupid decisions, and then the plot itself was not even very good. So yeah, I wasn't a fan personally. And yeah, I gave that one 2 stars in the end, which was a shame, but you know, it's fine. I did read another witchy book which I loved, and I'll talk about it later on. And at least I read it and it gave me that nice like autumnal feel in October, which is what I wanted. But I will not be continuing on with the series, that's for sure. The next book I'm going to talk about is another disappointing one because I really like this author's poetry, but so far I have not enjoyed their books that much, although I'm willing to give her series a chance. She has this like series which is kind of popular on TikTok, I think. Anyway, the book is The Anti-Relationship Year by Katie Wismer. I love her poetry. I have all 3 of her collections hiding over there. You can't see them, but they're there. And yeah, I love her poetry. And I read her first book, The Anti-Virginity Pact. I got an arc of it, and I really enjoyed that one actually. It was not the best book I've ever read, but it wasn't awful. Not that this book was awful. That's harsh, but I just didn't enjoy it at all. Like, I felt like a lot of it didn't make any sense. Like, the character decisions, the pacing, the relationship, like, it just was not really... It was a miss for me. And I feel like this book, people either really like it or they really don't like it. And I think I fell into that camp. It basically follows our main character, Joanna, who is a side character from the first book, The Anti-Virginity Pact. She's like the main character's best friend in that book, and in this book she's gone off to college, and it's told in 2 timelines. The first timeline is like her first year at college, and the last timeline is her final year at college. And basically in her first year at college, like, things do not go very well, but throughout the whole time she's got this friend called Miller, and it's a friends to lovers romance. And it just, like I said, the pacing didn't make sense for me. I didn't love the characters, and yeah, it's such a shame because I really wanted to love it. But I am willing to give her Marionettes series a chance. That's like a new adult vampire series with also like witches and stuff, and it's supposed to be pretty good. So hopefully I read that and enjoy that, but I haven't got to it yet. I'm thinking maybe next like September, October time I'll read it. But yeah, I gave that one a 2.5 out of 5 stars. And the next book I also gave 2.5 stars, and that was Legendborn by Tracy Dion. And this is like such an unpopular opinion, but I feel like, again, this is one where like so many people love it, but if you don't love it, you don't really like it at all. And yeah, I fell into that camp. I didn't want to, but that's where I ended up. It basically follows our main character, Bree. She basically gets accepted to this like university, but it's like a pre-college thing that she's doing. Like it's kind of like college level classes, but for high school students. So she's still in high school, but she's not. She's like on campus at a university. And when she goes there, she basically discovers this group of people who have magical powers. And it's basically like, it's an Arthurian retelling. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. It's like that retold, basically. And again, this one was just kind of boring. The pacing didn't work for me. The characters were annoying, and just all in all, it was not for me. I talked about this a lot more in my reading vlog that I posted for the book-off-a-thon, so I'll link that up in the card, because it was quite a while ago when I read this. Didn't really enjoy that one. I was expecting to love it, but I didn't, which is such a shame, but there you go. Next one on my list is another audiobook. I listened to the audiobook for Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. This is an audiobook that I got ages ago. When I wanted to cancel my Audible subscription, I had like 5 credits to use up, so I just bought a bunch of random audiobooks, and this was one of them. If you didn't know, I'm vegan. I know, I'm sure you do know, because vegans are annoying and they tell you all the time that they're vegan. I try not to be that vegan, but anyway. But yeah, I am vegan myself. I like to learn about the meat industry and stuff like that. Anyway, so I bought the audiobook a while ago because it had been recommended. I would not recommend the audiobook personally if you like to listen to audiobooks in big chunks like I do. Like, I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks this year because I used to listen to them while I was at work, and I would be cleaning for literally like an hour and a half every day, and I would just listen to audiobooks that whole time. And so I was doing the same thing with this audiobook, but that is not a good idea because this is so harrowing. Like, you do not want to do that. It is horrifying, the descriptions of how animals are treated and all that, and like obviously that's the point, but I ended up giving that like 3 stars because my reading experience was not fun, but I think the information is worth your time. Speaking of books that are just fine, I read Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood, and I gave it 3 stars as well. I read this at the wrong time, so I was reading this book whilst Alex was in the hospital, and I think I was just missing him, and I just wasn't in the mood for romance, and I'm still not really in the mood for romance, although I have read a romance since and really enjoyed it, but we'll get to that later. So I read Love on the Brain, and I thought it was just okay. I loved The Love Hypothesis. I read it last year when I was in isolation, when I had COVID, and I just had like a great time with it. I read it all in the space of 24 hours, and I had a great time with it. 5 out of 5 stars. Love it. Love on the Brain, however, I did not love. I thought it was really predictable. I just didn't like the way that this one was set up as much. Like, the other one really hit it for me, but this one just like, nah. It was a miss, and I gave it 3 stars, so it wasn't bad, but it just wasn't for me personally this time. My next 3-star read was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, yet another audiobook that I listened to this year. When I first read this book, I was like, oh my god, I did not like that at all. It was so boring, like, this was such a waste of my time, and this is so different from what I was expecting. But then I thought about it, and I was like, okay, actually, it was really different from what I was expecting, but it's not a bad book. It's actually a really, really good book, but I just didn't enjoy it that much, which is why I still gave it 3 stars even upon reflection. When you actually stop to think about it, like, it's really well done. It's basically just like about loneliness and about being misunderstood, and it's just like, it was actually really, really good, but I was bored when I read it. And I think that's because I went in with the wrong expectations because of how media has always presented represented Frankenstein's monster. I thought it was going to be this like kind of spooky, monster going on a murderous rampage. And in a way, like, that, it is a monster going on a murderous rampage, but it's different. It's not so much action-packed and more just about like, thinking about it. So I ended up giving that one a 3 out of 5 stars. Next, we have yet another audiobook. There's such a theme for the last 4 months. I listened to the audiobook for Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is another one that I got when my Audible was running out. This is basically a book set after a pandemic, although some of it is set like just as the pandemic is starting. So I wanted to put this book off for quite a while. This one was such a weird one because it's like, I enjoyed it, but I didn't like love it, and I didn't really know what I was supposed to get out of it. Like, it felt like one of those books where I'm supposed to leave the book feeling a certain way, feeling like I've learned something, but I just kind of felt like, okay, that was fine, and now it's over. Like, that's just how I felt when I finished it. So I don't know, I think that would have been a really good one to discuss with some people, like in a book club sort of setting. But anyway, I enjoyed it. It was okay. I gave it 3.5 stars. We now have 4 stars and up for the rest of the video. I finally finished the Diviners series by Libba Bray. I finally listened to the audiobook for King of Crows. I started the series in 2015 or 16, and I loved the Diviners. I still really like that book. I think the whole series actually is so fun, really spooky. If you don't know what the Diviners is about, it basically is a young adult paranormal series set in the 1920s in New York City, and it follows this big cast of characters who all have like special powers, and throughout the whole series there's this sort of like mystery in a way. Like, they're trying to figure out like why they have these powers, how they got them, and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, I thought the King of Crows was a really nice conclusion. I really enjoyed it. I've heard this one's got like a lot of bad reviews of people just finding it a little bit disappointing, and I think, you know, it could have been better, that's for sure. I think it was a little bit anticlimactic after all those years of build-up, but I still really enjoyed it. I had a great time with it, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read was yet another audiobook. I listened to the audiobook for They Went Left by Monica Hesse. This is a young adult historical fiction set after the end of World War II. I think it was set in Poland, and it follows a Jewish girl who was in a concentration camp, and she's just left after the end of the war, and basically she's on a mission to try and find her brother because they were separated, and so she's going around to all of the places that he might be, trying to find him and trying to just figure out how to continue on with life after everything has been taken away from her. I thought it was really interesting to look at that specific time, because most World War II fiction focuses on actually like during the war, and then it will finish like with the end of the war, but this one is, you know, following what happened afterwards, which I think was just really an interesting approach. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And the next 3 books are 3 of the books from the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. I have been loving this series. I started it in August actually when I was on holiday, but I finished Truly Devious in September, and then I listened to the audiobook for The Vanishing Stair and The Hand on the Wall, which are books 2 and 3, and I gave all of the books so far 4 stars because I'm just having such a fun time with it. It's basically this young adult mystery series following our main character, Stevie Bell, who wants to be a detective, although at the moment she's like 16, and she basically gets accepted into this really exclusive boarding school called the Ellingham Academy, where basically the people who are enrolled into that school have like very specific niche interests, and they're like, the whole thing is that they're like, there's this massive budget for them to use to like pursue their interests, and it's just for like really like bright minds. Anyway, so Stevie is accepted into the school. The main reason why is because one of the cases that she's really interested in is the Ellingham case, which is basically the fact that shortly after Albert Ellingham opened the school in the 1930s, his wife and daughter were kidnapped and disappeared, and there was a ransom letter signed by Truly Devious, and the case has been unsolved this whole time. So Stevie's going with the plan to solve this case, and it's just a really fun series. I really am enjoying it so much, and I'm reading the 4th book right now. I'm having a great time. Actually, I left off at like such a cliffhanger, and then I had to stop and do something else, so I need to get back to that audiobook ASAP because yeah, I really enjoying it. My camera died, so I just had like a 25-minute break, but I'm back. We're almost done. I promise, we're nearly there. The next book I'm going to talk about was a reread. I finished off my reread of the Infernal Devices trilogy with Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. I gave this one a 4.5. I possibly prefer it to the Mortal Instruments, except that I think that the Infernal Devices, I feel like the villain isn't as good in the Infernal Devices as in the Mortal Instruments. I don't know, but I loved it. It was so fun being back in that world. I was reading it for the Shadowhunter read-along, which I've now fallen very far behind on, but I do hope to get caught up at one point, at some point in the future. It was a really fun reread. Again, I listened to the audiobook. When do I ever actually read physically nowadays? Actually, the next 4 books I'm going to talk about, I did read physically, but you know, it's fine. The next one I'm going to be talking about is an adult high fantasy. I've been intimidated by that specific, like, genre, or that specific category of adult high fantasy for the longest time, but I've been wanting to get into it because I love fantasy, and I feel like young adult fantasy doesn't do it for me as much as it used to these days. Like, I feel like I need the juicy, like, political, intense adult high fantasy. Anyway, so I read The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, the first book in the Mistborn trilogy, which I know is not just a trilogy. There's like the original trilogy, and then there's like 3 books afterwards, and then there's also like a 7th book which I saw on Goodreads, and I don't really know how the whole Brandon Sanderson reading order is working, but I own the whole Mistborn trilogy, so I'm just gonna read that first and then figure out the rest from there. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It basically takes place in this world where hundreds of years ago there was like this war and the evil guy won and now is ruling the whole land. So for like your average person, it's really not a great place to live. You know, a lot of people are just like randomly killed for nothing. There's a lot of slavery, and also like everywhere is just gray now. Like there's no color in the world. Like the trees aren't green anymore. There aren't flowers. Like it's just horrible now where they live, and every night there's all this mist. But in this world, basically certain people, normally the like noblemen, they can basically do this thing called allomancy where they ingest certain metals and it gives them different powers. Anyway, but most people can only do one metal. Even if they have another metal, they can't actually use it. But there are some people called Mistborn who can use all of the metals. So it basically follows 2 characters who are Mistborn. They are basically planning to overthrow the Dark Lord. Oh my god, I'm just remembering it. It's so good. I think basically Mistborn is everything I wanted Six of Crows to be, but just 1,000 times better, because I don't actually like Six of Crows. I think it was not very good, and I don't understand the hype. Whatever. We don't need to talk about that. But yeah, I didn't like Six of Crows, but I loved Mistborn, and I felt like it gave me the vibes that everyone like said Six of Crows was like, but I didn't get that from Six of Crows. But Mistborn, like, this did it for me. I loved this so much. I haven't continued on with the series yet, but I need to, because I feel like I'm gonna forget everything that happened. So yeah, I need to continue on with this because I loved it so much. I gave it 4.5 stars as well. It wasn't quite a full 5, but I have hopes for the rest of the series. So even though earlier in the video I said that I haven't been having much luck with romance, I have actually had 2 romance books recently, which I really enjoyed. So the first one of those was Beach Read by Emily Henry. Now, Emily Henry has really, we've had a bit of a roller coaster this year, because I started off reading People We Meet on Vacation by her, and I really didn't like it. I think I gave it like 3 stars in my wrap up, but like upon reflection, I lowered it down to a 2 because I just felt nothing for that book at all. Anyway, so I went to Beach Read a bit nervous because everyone said, you know, it's not like this super light, fluffy beach read like everyone makes it out to be. There's actually a lot more to it. And after having that experience with People We Meet on Vacation, I was a bit more nervous for this one. So I think I lowered my expectations a bit. And then I just absolutely loved it. This is another one that I was reading while I was at work when we had no customers, and I was just eating it up. Like, I remember we then got some customers and I was like, no, I'm having such a fun time with this. And yeah, I just loved this one. Basically follows our main characters. I think her name's January and his name is Gus, and they were basically like college rivals. They're both writers now. So January moves into her dad's old like lake house because her dad has unfortunately passed away, and it turns out she moves in right next door to Gus. Anyway, both of them are writers and they're having trouble writing books at the moment. So they decide to like swap genres, because he like writes these like literary masterpieces and she writes romance, and she feels like he's kind of looking down upon romance. So they switch genres for the summer, and they both have to write a book in the opposite genre. And meanwhile, they fall in love, and it was so fun. I loved it. I really enjoyed this one much more than People We Met on Vacation. No, People We Meet on Vacation, whatever it's called. Anyway, but since reading that, I did start reading Book Lovers, and I could not get into it at all. Book Lovers is her most recent release, and yeah, I just couldn't get into that at all. And I don't know why. I think it's just like not the time right now, maybe, for like that sort of romance, so I might try it again in the summer, but for now, I'm putting that one aside. But yeah, Beach Read is my top Emily Henry book at the moment. So the other romance book that I read recently was The Ex Hex by Erin Sterling, and this book was so much fun. Oh my god, this is everything I wanted from Small Town Big Magic, but it was actually good. It follows your main character. What the hell is her name? This is the last book that I finished, and I can't remember her name. Oh, Vivian. It follows her main character, Vivian, and she basically lives in this small town, which is full of witches, but also people, like normal people who don't practice magic, different from Small Town Big Magic. She has always known that she's a witch, and basically 10 years ago there was this guy called Reese who was on the scene, and they had a summer romance, and she was really in love with him, but he had to go back to Wales because he was engaged to someone else and basically broke her heart. So she like jokingly put a curse on him with her cousin, and it was all supposed to be a joke, but turns out that they did actually curse him, because when he comes back to town, because he's like, his ancestors were like the town founders, so when he comes back to the town to perform this like ceremony on the ley lines, everything starts going wrong because he was cursed. And yeah, so it's sort of like an enemies to lovers romance with that like witchy vibes. I just loved this one. It was so fun, so quick to read. I think it, you know, it's like trashy but in the best possible way. Anyway, I'm so excited to read the next book, but I'm actually waiting until like September, October time next year, even though like I just want to read it right now because it was so fun. But yeah, I really loved this one, and if you wanted a witchy book, read that one. Don't read Small Town Big Magic. So we're finally on to my last book, my favorite book that I've read in the last 4 months. Thank God, because my voice is hurting so much from talking. But yes, my favorite book that I've read in the last 4 months was a nonfiction book by the one and only Amanda Montell, who wrote Cultish, which was one of my favorite books of last year. So a while ago, I started reading her first nonfiction book, which is called Wordslut, A Feminist Guide to Taking Back the English Language. I think that is what it's called. Oh, so good. Anyway, so I decided to start reading that. I started reading it on Scribd, actually, and I was not very far in when I was like, actually, I already know I'm gonna love this, so let me just buy it. So I did buy it, and I finished reading it, and I tabbed it so much. Oh my god. Literally, like, I just loved this so much. So yeah, if you've been following my channel for a while, you probably know that I have a niche interest in linguistics, and I love linguistics nonfiction. If I can get my hands on it, I want to read it. I do need to branch into like linguistics in fiction, like Babel, for example, or Babel, whatever it's called. But anyway, I love linguistics, and so I knew I was going to love this one, and yeah, I don't have a bad word to say about it. If you love linguistics, if you like feminism, you should read this book, basically. Anyway, my camera is dying, and I've already had to charge it once, and my voice is going. So, those are all of the books that I've read since August, ranked from worst to best. Please let me know what books you've read and enjoyed recently. I would love to know, as I'm really struggling to find books that I'm loving. Although, not really, because I've had a lot of good ratings, but it feels like I haven't found a favorite in a long time. Let me know what your favorite books you've read recently are. I would love to know if you've read any of the books I talked about. Let me know your thoughts down below. But that's all I have for this video, so I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe down below, and I will hopefully see you very soon with another video. Bye! Play your stupid game.
I want to try to zombie noisy.
Yeah, please.
Hey, motherfuckers!
Please don't. Don't do that! I'm never gonna be able to do it with you if you look at me all the time.
Goodness.
I'm going to... Oopsies. It turns out, so the main character... words. I'm running out of battery again, and I just want to finish this video.